Hello, everyone. Hello from Copenhagen, Denmark. And I would like to welcome you to our Grab and Go session today. We used to have this session in person, but because of Corona, we're obviously having it virtually. But I think this is as effective and able to share our knowledge and our experience in the space. Today, we're going to be covering the topic of privileged access management. I think it's going to be a very fun topic. I would like to at least let you know that, if you have any questions along the presentation, please write them down and then send us the questions after. And and myself, my colleague here, will be more than happy to come back to you with the answers to those questions. So today, we will cover 5 areas of privileged access management. First, we will start with a quick introduction. And then second, we'll get into what is PAM. And third is why this matters for companies, for our clients. And then fourth, we'll cover our approach and our experience in addressing and working through PAM. As well, then finally, we will end with your next steps and how we could actually work together in this topic in the area of privileged access management. First, as a quick introduction, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Johnny Shin. I am a partner in cyber risk in Denmark, Deloitte, and I'm actually responsible for the IAM practice across the Denmark as well as supporting the Nordics as well. I've been in this information security and identity and access management field for past over 20 years now, and I've been in the various industries, including the financial services, the manufacturing, pharma, and latest energy sectors as well. I actually moved to Denmark just over a year ago, and it's been a great experience, working and learning the new culture and working with the different clients in Denmark, where I used to actually live in the U.S. Past actually most of my life in the U.S. and spending good time here in Denmark just past a year. Now, Anand. Actually, I'm very privileged and excited to have you actually present this, the Grab and Go together. But maybe have you start a quick introduction of yourself to our audience?
Sure. Thank you, Johnny. And good morning, everyone. My name is Anand Gujral. I've been working with identity and access management since last 10 years now. I have worked with identity management, access management, and privileged access management. I've worked for global clients. I've helped them do IAM assessments, help clients with IAM journeys, make a strategy and a roadmap, as well as hands-on implementation. I have been associated with Deloitte Denmark now since more than 2 years, and it has been great so far.
Great. Anand, it's never easy to have a virtual sort of webinar, type of like this. Yeah. And, I think we do get nervous, let's admit it, we do. But, I think it's still exciting that, that we're able to actually share our experience with our colleagues and our, the practitioners out in the market. I think it would be great if we can make this very interactive and, make it fun for our audience who's listening to this. And, and when we actually, Anand and I decided to do this, we actually thought about a movie. I don't know if anybody actually watched the movie called Harold and Kumar, but, I think we actually fit very well. And, we can't probably live up to that movie, but we'll make this topic as much as fun as possible. So, stay tuned and let's get into the topic as well. So, Anand, I want to start with a quick question. Have you ever seen the first access control system in the world?
Not in the world, but in my experience, in the last 10 years, yes.
Okay.
But I'm not sure where you're getting at.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, obviously, I asked this question, in any of the identity and access management seminars or the webinars. But, that actually is the first access control system.
Yeah, I couldn't have actually guessed that, Johnny.
Right. I think this actually shows very profound. I think access control has been around with us since the beginning of our sort of maybe the civilization, as when human realized the value of certain things that they possess or they have. For example, like family or the goods that they consume or the treasures or the wealth that they have. As soon as the human realize the value of those, then they put an access control around this. So, I think we could proudly say that we're in the field that's very profound and very foundational to human nature, and that goes into the history of our ancestors, right?
Definitely.
So now today, we have improved our technology, our the intelligence on the regulating and controlling access to our assets, and the assets themselves actually became very different than what we used to have in the past. So we have a much more stronger sort of the ways of controlling access to people. And that's what PAM, Privileged Access Management, is about. And this is what we want to get into today, throughout our presentation. So with that, let's get into what is PAM. PAM, Anand, it's not your girlfriend that you had in your college, but PAM is something else. So I would maybe, have you explain what PAM is?
Yeah, thanks again, Johnny. So yeah, talking about PAM, right, which stands for Privileged Access Management. Now what this is, right? PAM is a practice of actually controlling and managing, as well as securing privileged, not privileged, but let's call them just accounts and accesses that have access to permissions that can actually make an impact on your critical assets, right? Now, these permissions could be as simple as read access, right, on data that is not authorized, right? Permissions to make changes to this data, permissions to alter configurations that can actually make an impact on this data, right? And as well as permissions such as to run scripts or programs or queries which can impact the system in any way. We don't know, right? But now, what I've been saying so far is actually very IT, right? Maybe let's take an example of something from our life, Johnny, and let's try to understand what privileged access management is all about. The example I would like to take here is of a music concert or a rock concert, right? The reason also I take this example is because this is very close to our life. I think everybody enjoys going to such concerts.
Yes.
And we've been missing this for a year now, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes. So I think, yeah, maybe people can relate to it more, right? The reason I'm taking this example is, as you can see, or people who have been to rock concerts or have watched on televisions, right? They know there's a stage where there are musicians and singers who perform, right? And then there is one side of the stage where there is audience and people who have come to actually view them, right? People, what they don't see is the backstage, right? There's a backstage where we have technicians, sound and light engineers, and other supporting crew and staff that is responsible for actually managing this, right? But people only see what is happening on the stage, right? The singers and the musicians. Now, why do I take this example and how does it actually relate to a corporate, right? I actually relate this as a corporate is just imagine the stage or the whole rock concert as a business, as a corporate organization, right? Where the stage, the musicians and the singers, they are the business owners, basically, or you can call them as business applications, right? And they are basically, generating the revenue, right? But the people, the management plane, right? That's on the backstage, right? Those are the guys who are actually responsible for running the business, right? Because they are equally important, because if there are no sound engineers or light engineers, a rock concert would be a failure, right? A musician cannot actually sing without a mic that is operating, and in order to manage that, we have to have those people. So I think it's a collaboration. So basically a backstage in a rock concert enables you to perform on the stage. And similarly, right, the management plane in any organization actually enables you to run the business. I hope that makes sense.
No,
right?
it does. I think.
And hope people can relate back to the last rock concert they've been to.
Right. I mean, a couple of things that really that I was able to take away is that we put a lot of emphasis on the front end. What it shows to the customers, and then our partners. But then that's is as only good as how well you have managed on the back end. Right?
Yes.
And many times we neglect to look at the back end, and that's where we experience, or many of our the customers and the clients experience challenges addressing some of the holes in their security. Because of so much lack of controls in the back ends and disorganized. And I think this is what it's getting into. Second thing, actually, Anna, you mentioned something about the privileged access is not just about writing something or making changes, but it could also be about read only as well.
Yes.
Because not many people understand, but if you can read critical data information, that in itself is a privileged access. And how malicious intent or accidentally whatever the intention may be to take that information from the read-only access, privileged access, and then use that against, in the company. That could be a serious issue too.
Yes.
So that's a very good analogy, I believe. Yeah. And then maybe we can further continue.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, this was a very simple example, right? But again, coming to an organization, right, it gets a bit complex, right? Because in a concert, the management plane is just behind the stage, right? But in an IT organization, it could be anywhere, right? And considering the today's environment where we have hybrid infrastructure, right? We have applications and systems residing on the cloud. We have on-premise still, so there's a hybrid setup. We have third-party applications, SaaS-based solutions, right? We have IT infrastructure spread across the globe, right? Even if the organization is based on one part of the globe, but we have their IT infrastructure from sunset to sunrise and just monitoring that, right? So we have to be very careful about these privileged accesses, right? We have to actually identify what these actors are. So when I actually defined a privileged access, we have to be mindful about certain characteristics,
Right.
like who these actors are, right? Which accounts they are using for what purposes, as well as which geography they belong to, as well as what device they do use. Some privileged access could be as simple as using from a mobile device, right? It does not have to be from a workstation or a laptop, right? So we have to be careful about all these. And again, just taking some more example of privileged accesses, it is not just a human account, right? It could be application accounts, it could be service accounts that are embedded in APIs, database queries, like I was saying. And sometimes it is hard-coded in a code, which, sorry about that, but it is still true. We've seen that. Or if not in the code, then in a property file, but in a plain text. So that is equally harmful, right? If a hacker actually gets access to the systems. Also, there are emergency accounts, the built-in accounts and systems account, which are actually created or are there for emergency purposes, but are used on a daily basis. So again, coming back to privileged accesses, I think we have to have these characteristics defined, right? The geographies they are coming to, the device, the actors, the purposes. And also when I say the purpose, it goes back to what protocol they use to actually access the systems. So I think everything, all these 4 parameters are very important when we are defining a privileged access use case.
That's very insightful. And also, just from what you're sharing, again, I think, many organizations now, many of the IT or the identity and access management practitioners and, people are aware of a PAM. They heard of the PAM and they know, many of the solutions out in the market. And I think when people kind of think about PAM, automatically they think about just the physical people having access to sensitive servers or the database sort of things. But then many customers forget to think that there are privileged accounts that are also could be embedded into the source codes or the services that they run and configured, the batch jobs that they run. There are many of the accounts out there that it may not be directly connected to human, physical person, but there are still accounts with carrying a high privilege against the infrastructure, which if a compromise could also be used against the companies.
Yes, and just like you said, maybe adding some more words to that, right? as I was talking about, the scope for privileged access management is huge because management planes are everywhere, basically in an IT organization, right? It's not as simple as a concert where it's only the backstage, right? Now, it takes a long time to actually detect an abuse of a privileged account. But by that time, it has done a lot of damage, right? And just taking a few examples which are very common here, the initial infection, right, or virus can actually be generated by a user just clicking on a wrong link on a website, or as simple as clicking on a phishing email, right? And then if the standard account gets compromised, the reconnaissance starts immediately and it continues throughout the attack life cycle, right? The virus actually tries to take more control over accounts, over accesses, till the time they actually get an access to a management plane and do some big compromise, right? And only then it gets reflected and alerts are generated. But the actual compromise or the actual attack has happened maybe 2 months back with just somebody clicking on a wrong email or a wrong link on the website, right? And which is why it is super important to protect these accounts.
Yeah, exactly. I think, if you're in the security field and have dealt with the incident response, I myself have actually had a past experience, addressing or responding to a ransomware attack, actually, right? And also the malware, that kind of spread. And I know I noticed the pattern of those attacks are, ways for them to obtain compromise an account, and then they keep escalating to sort of like a domain, controller, the admin account, or the root accounts, that has the power to the kingdom, keys to the kingdom. And then, from there, they do whatever they can, or want to do in the environment. So I think go ahead.
Yes. Just to actually going back to the slide, Johnny, right? We just talked about privileged accounts where there are, the scope is huge, right? And how can we get infected and how can they be abused? But I would just like to maybe call out just few basic controls that are very basic and I think are, I won't say easy to implement, but still they don't take a lot of time. But every organization should actually look into these, right? So something like a multi-factor authentication, right? I think it's super important to have multi-factor authentication enforced on the users of privileged accounts, right? That actually helps you control the brute force attacks as well as the lateral movements as get composed, right? And things like password management. Now, password management actually is not just about rotating the passwords, right? Again, I would like to go back to my example of a phishing email, right? The first step is to segregate a standard account and an admin account. Again, I've seen so many clients that have that grant admin access on a standard account. And that's a very, very bad practice, and it used to happen maybe 2 decades back or something maybe even back, right? So these accounts should be segregated, admin accounts and standard accounts. That's the first step. And then also you should just grant just-in-time access on these admin accounts.
Just in time, yes.
Yeah, so users should not possess these accounts all the time. They should just check out and check in these accounts. And password should be rotated after each use. So these are very standard practices that any organization can actually do, right, to implement that.
That's great. I mean, I think the audience may have gotten it. I think we share quite a bit of good experience around this. Just to summarize, sort of what is PAM. I think it's really the protection of the access to the production infrastructure. That could include the SAs, developers, or DBAs, or even the business users who have privileged accounts or accesses to the production environment, as well as protection of access to source code repository. I think the people underestimate the importance of protecting the source codes that are used and that are being deployed for the applications or the business, the platforms. But I think that's where the fundamental actually starts in protecting access to your core repository, as well as protecting the credentials that are stored in your source code. more the legacy. Please do not neglect the legacy, the systems or areas that may have this embedded. May want to go back and see which ones are and be able to address them. And then lastly, the protection of privileged services accounts that are used in the DevOps pipeline or some sort of the automation, from the deployment cycle of the any codes or the changes happening in the infrastructure. So I think in many of the privileged access management, there are many other areas. However, I think these are maybe the 4 fundamental areas where companies should look at and make sure they're protecting themselves from this, the areas. And there are some bullet points here with some measures that you could actually apply. So then maybe we go into why this matters. I think we actually quite talked about this quite a bit. I think we live with the 4 areas of the why this care and why should you care about this. And we actually quite a bit talk about the risk factor to it. But I think companies will realize there's actually tremendous amount of pressure to even meet the compliance requirement nowadays. Yeah. My client in the past, where we actually implemented privileged access management, that project was solely driven because of the compliance requirements, and that there was the lack of controls in the accesses that the IT the group had against their production, and even the lower environments like development, test environments as well, that were just mismanaged and unstructured, and nobody, they were sharing the passwords all over. So the internal audit and external audit, and that was one of the key findings. And then they were able to actually get the budget to actually address this issue, not knowing how serious it was actually to the security risk side of it. So I think as much as the security challenges that we would address through the PAM, there is also the compliance, and then the continuity, and then the cost actually is another factor where you may actually end up losing quite a bit of money if you have a compromise of this privilege account. Maybe due to the sabotage of somebody maliciously intending to damage your company and using this, and you don't have control over them, and it brings the shutdown to the business. That could be tremendous impact to the business. So we want to make sure that you have a proper controls around this privileged access to prevent and also address some of the regulations and compliance requirements as well. Now, I think we have spoken a lot about what is it and why this matters. Now let's talk about what we actually do for our clients, Anat. I think we have done tremendous amount of work in the past with our clients implementing the PAM in the right way. But how long have you been in the PAM field?
So I've been in the PAM field for last 5 years now.
5 years.
Yes.
But you always been in the identity access management.
Yes.
Right? So with that as a foundation now, because the PAM became the spotlight of the sort of the security and then the compliance, so you took this on. But if you can share, your experience of implementing PAM in the right way, I think that is really going to be helping our clients as well.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny. So in my experience so far, being in just the identity space and then focusing a lot on the PAM part in the last few years, right? What I have realized personally, and I have learned, that PAM is not about implementing a tool, not about exactly, it's not about a technology. It's a combination, a very well mixtured combination of 3 towers, which I call people, process, and technology, right? It's a good mix of all 3 towers. What I actually mean by people is that an organization should have the right level of skills and capabilities, the right resources to actually carry out the objectives that they set for this program, right? Even if you actually invest in a tool or technology, right? What after the project is over? You still have to run the project. Yeah. So you still have to have the right organization. Going back to an operating model, right? You should have the right operating model to actually do this. and as well as
Yeah,
supporting
have you
processes.
control this?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Right. So, and then what I have here is I have 6 key areas that actually influence the effectiveness of any PAM project, and these are actually divided into all 3 towers: people, processes, and technology. Right. So, starting with the access management, what does access management mean in terms of privileges? Right. It starts with implementing what I call it least privilege principle. Right. So, when privileges are actually assigned to a system account or any admin account, we should always keep in mind the principle of least privileges. We should just grant the bare minimum sufficient rights any administrator or any account is required to do a job, right? Which is why the objective is very important. Why do we
Least
need
privilege, yeah.
the privileged account on an access? So which is why, going back to one of the parameters in creating a privileged account is the objective, right? And then grant only the least privileged accesses, right? And then again, the access management also is dependent on how you access the account, right? So maybe you can have 3 different types of privileged accounts, which is one where you can elevate your privileges, but it should be supported by a role-based access control. And now this is tying very well with the IGA system, right?
And
Here-
IGA is? For the
Identity,
audience?
governance, and administration, right? So it goes back because PAM is not an IGA system.
Right.
If you have to have a very good role model or you have to have the right access management, you should have a very close collaboration between these two. An IGA system, that is the identity governance, that actually controls who has access to what privileged accounts and when they can access this, right? I always see quite a few use cases where this is very important, right? And some companies just fail to understand, if they have IGA, why do they need PAM, and vice versa. If they have PAM, then why do they need IGA, right? But these two are totally different, but they have to have an integration, a close integration for certain use cases.
Right.
Yeah. Moving on to the authentication management part. Authentication management part starts with actually defining the processes, right? I have seen organizations that still do not have a right password policy, right? They miss on the basics, right?
Right.
If you don't have a password policy, what will a PAM technology do, right? So start with identifying what your privileged accounts are, define what privileged account is, and then define the password policy. I understand there could be legacy systems which actually have limitations of holding a strong passwords, like a 20 characters, but again, you should have the segregation there, right? And then define the password rules, the frequency on what the password should be updated for each type of account, right?
I'm sure we don't have our clients using password 123 as password. But
Yeah, or
we never
admin 1,
know.
2, 3.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah,
admin
that's
1,
the
2, 3.
privilege, yeah. So, yes. And then we should actually look into the authentication mechanisms, understand what different authentication mechanisms are for those systems or applications,
Right.
such as one is a standard password based, then there are token based, certificate based, keys based, right? And also multi-factor authentication is one kind of a password based solution. So we should actually explore all these mechanisms and then choose what fits for that application, for that system, or for the organization, right? And then implement those authentication mechanisms even in PAM, because PAM today is capable of authenticating against all these authentication mechanisms, right? Yes. The third one is on the account control. Now, what we mean by account control is basically the account lifecycle management, right? So how and when is a privileged account created, what rights is it assigned, and when a system is decommissioned or an application goes offline, it's sunsetted, is it decremented, right? Is it offboarded? Are the permissions removed? And I think there's a close collaboration again with the identity governance part, right? Yes. So I have actually a few use cases where we have these overlap between an IGA and a PAM, a close connection, right? That people should actually look out for. The third one is traceability of actions. Now, traceability of actions starts with having the appropriate level of logging, right? Why the appropriate level of logging is required on a PAM system as well as on target systems and application is so that you can track back to an identity, not an account, but an identity who is actually using it. And this is very important, and I emphasize there are organizations and clients that are using a shared account model. So it is very important for those so that they can track back to actually who was using it, right? And even better if they can video log it, right? So there's a video recording, and not just logging, but a video recording of the sessions, right? So that will actually help us with more traceability, right? And what exactly actions they are doing. And going to the shared model again, I think we can have a role-based access control on top of it, and then the IGA can control that part. Yes? Moving on to the access path controls, and I think I talked about this, but let's reiterate myself. This is actually identifying the right access paths to critical system, right? And again, this goes back to the 4 parameters of who are these actors and where are they based, what is their geographic locations, is it a third-party vendor that is managing the solution, or are these situated in a different country, different continent, right? What are the time zones that they work? Are they working 24/7 so that we can also monitor the IP addresses? What kind of device do they use, right? And also the important part is the protocols. What protocols do they use, right? That is actually very important even when identifying there's something suspicious is happening with the privileged account. And then what type of systems do they access, right? So we should limit the privileged accounts to only the systems that they have to access, right? And the last one, the 6th one, is the actual system control, right? And when I say system control, it is actually on the target system. We should harden the target system as well as the PAM system. I mean, it is one of the basic controls, like in the cyber risk or the cyber security framework, that patching is mandatory. Things like that, right? Vulnerability management. Have a frequent pen test performed on the systems. That is very important in identifying. These are the things that is a PAM solution won't do, but will definitely get help from in identify where the risk lies, what needs to be protected, and how.
Right.
Yep.
Great. I think this 6 approaches here, it really makes sense. And one thing that actually kind of stuck to me is defining the access path controls. Right. Many times we only know what we do, but forget to think about what other type of different people have, how they get into the assets themselves. Like if I think one thing that we tend to forget is when you have a vendor coming in to troubleshoot your servers or something in your environment, you forget that because those are not common. It doesn't happen day to day.
Yeah.
So you sort of have a sort of one-off process for these people who have access to your environment, and whether they go through via the VPN or you just open up some backdoor for them.
Yeah.
But then those are sort of because of they're under fire to troubleshoot. But then they don't, many times they just kind of neglect to go back and close those.
Exactly.
Or address those.
Yes.
Or even, address them as a sort of a, process that had to be dealt in a much more, formalized way. So I think these are really, good 6 areas that we should really look into as where, anybody's considering to implement PAM.
Yes.
As well.
And it all starts with a mix of people, process, and technology, right? So you said, you have to have the right operating model to actually execute the processes you built with the help of the technology we have, right? So it's not about a tool.
Yeah. So I guess next slide, this is, Anand, you know me as a very structured person.
Definitely.
I approach any work with a sort of a framework in a structured way. And for myself, as you have that, 6, the steps, areas to focus, I always also like to recommend our clients having a framework in addressing PAM. And as you said rightly, it's not only about implementing, installing, configuring a solution tool in your environment and just start, protecting or giving the password check-in, check-out, or recording, session recording. It's actually about integration to the existing IT environment. And this is just a framework which actually we will share in the material after the this session. But I've actually we have defined 7 areas of the PAM that has to be or should be looked into as you're approaching. And I'm not going to dive into every single boxes here, but the 7 areas include the first starting with the policy. Have your security policy defined. How you should actually control the privileged accesses accounts in your environment. Many clients don't have that, and they just kind of sort of react to things and react to incidents. But I think it's important to go back and there is a right measures of policies and standards defined to address those. Secondly, then, going into the enterprise IAM layer, as you mentioned about integration with the Identity Governance Administration, I think PAM has to be tightly coupled with the Identity Governance Administration as the sort of the upstream, and then the PAM as the downstream impact, or vice versa, kind of feeding each other. And then going into the privileged access management layer, which we talk about commonly about the account discovery, session recording, password check and check out, password policies, and sort of stuff. And then you also need to think about the infrastructure integrations. So how is a PAM integrating with your infrastructure, sort of the services, whether they're DevOps or the source controls, incident management, in a request access, that type of stuff. How is that all integrating with the infrastructure services? And then integrating with the endpoint layers, whether they're servers, database, the middle layer, the systems, networks, cloud, hypervisor, all sorts of stuff. You should think about what are the different assets, and then understand the correlation or link between all these boxes and be able to come up with a sort of a streamlined processes in dealing with the privileged access across this. And then I say the 6 is very important, where you also want to integrate PAM with the security monitoring services, and that could be with the SIM, security information event management tools, where you're able to monitor certain events, activities, and be able to alert on some of the unexpected behaviors in the environment. And then lastly, having a privileged threat insider threat protection, because whether they are done intentionally or malicious with the malicious intent, there needs to be a sort of a monitoring in place to understand the baseline, the behavior that happens across these accounts that are in the infrastructure, and be able to understand the anomaly behavior that are happening, so that you can be better reacting to certain situations, events, incidents that are happening, and be able to detect and also prevent those measures actually, from learning from the incidents as well. So, I leave clients with the framework for them to also kind of look into, and really, as you said, Anand, that they need to get away from thinking about PAM as a technology solution alone. It is not. It is about the people changes, it's about process changes, and then technology comes to place.
Yeah, that was great, Johnny. Having a walkthrough of the framework. Shall I move ahead? Yeah. Okay, all right. Just expanding on what just Johnny talked about using a framework, my only message to our audience here is, and the clients that are looking at this webinar is, it's just basics, right? And this is personally that I've learned so far, that don't try to achieve everything in once, right? Actually, that is not possible, right? With PAM, definitely not. And I would just say start with knowing what the pain points are, right? You should exactly know what you want. You should have a draft of rationalized requirements, use cases that you would like to achieve using a PAM project, right? Just getting into or investing into a PAM tool will not help.
That's right.
So yeah, just try to understand what you want from a PAM project. That is so important. And then standardize as much as possible. That's my learning, and that's a learning from you, Johnny, as well, being so much structured, right? Standardize, follow a framework, reuse things, right? But establish that framework, and it could be any framework. It does not have to be the framework that we just walked you through. It could be any PAM framework. It could be any industry standard. But yeah, it is very important to be structured, especially with privileged access management, so that you don't miss out on anything. And then I would say, yeah, just have a risk-based and a pragmatic approach, right? So maybe it could be a very small start. Like I say, going back
That's
to
right.
what you also said, start by defining a policy. Maybe the policy is outdated. It refers back to somewhere in the 90s, right? So start small, start by defining a policy and processes and an operating model. Start there, right? And like I said, segregate the standard accounts with admin accounts. And maybe, yeah, then take a step forward and maybe, okay, now is the time to actually invest in a technology to actually help what processes we have. Yes? And maybe just talking from my client experiences, I would, if you have all this, then what I like to call it as a rapid risk mitigation program, right? Where you have actually identified what your crown jewels or assets are, you have a policy to, and you have requirements, you know what you want. So I would say then actually get into this rapid mitigation program where you actually have a vault, you onboard these accounts and just not vault them, but start enabling the password management. And even have an inventory of the privileged accounts, right? So that you know what privileged accounts you have. And maybe you see you have a lot more privileged accesses which you don't even need. So that will help you in the cleanup process, right?
That's right.
So that's just a rapid risk mitigation and establishing the core security of just having MFA, password management, frequently rotated passwords, session management, and that's about it, right? If you have all these 3-4 things ready, then I would suggest go into the advanced security options. Like, for example, securing your DevOps pipeline, right? Now, DevOps pipeline is a upcoming thing, right? Because the pipeline actually refers back to the key vault, or it could be another vault which has those credentials stored, right? And generally it's not secure, so you can leverage a PAM solution to secure that. And even for your application accounts or service accounts, right, which are stored again hard-coded in a property file or in the code itself. But that's an advanced layer. But we should start with the basic, right? That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I think many of the organizations have this sort of a nirvana vision of a PAM, and as soon as you have a solution technology implemented, they think they can just go after everything. But then that's where the pitfall happens, and they quickly realize, oh no, what do we get ourselves into? And they're not able to, programmatically structure the program, and then they are not getting the output that they expected. So there's a lot of challenges even running the project correctly and the right way. So I think you're right. Take a small piece at a time and get some quick wins, and then keep building and expanding PAM across the infrastructure. I think that is a very good advice for many of the organizations.
Yeah.
Great. I think this leads us to the last section, where what is the next step for you? Obviously, we have a journey mapped out for you. In the 3 steps, we obviously want to work with you, and we want to be able to, share much more experience in the PAM space. I think today's presentation really covered the basics and fundamentals of a PAM, what you could consider and how you should actually approach it. However, as we're getting into much more technical integrations with the DevOps, even nowadays, with many of the manufacturing energy companies, considering or going into the Purdue model of the OT infrastructure, how can you use PAM to secure your OT environment? That is another topic on its own that is keep popping up, and clients are really interested in structuring, protecting their production line, right?
Yes.
So I think there are much more in-depth sessions that we would actually like to do in the future that goes in much more depth. However, we start you with the 3 steps here. First step is start with the accelerated PAM assessment. Let us come work with you to actually run this assessment. And this doesn't have to be weeks of assessment. It could actually be a couple, the half-day sessions where we actually just understand your landscape of the people, process, technology, and then we come back with you with the recommendations. And then we take the step 2 with you, where based off of the recommendation, we could actually partner with the solution vendors to do a quick proof of concept or proof of value to demonstrate what the solution can do for your organization. And then once you feel comfortable, and then once you actually understand the value behind it for the environment, then we take the step 3 to release the capability. Now, I say the release of capabilities and onboarding because, again, it's not just the one big bang rollout. It's going to be a phase approach. It's going to be different releases. And then there are going to be different onboardings that have to come on to the platform that we build as a foundation. So we welcome, to have a further discussion with you and allow us to share much more in-depth experiences in PAM, with you together. Before we actually close, Anant, you have one last sort of words and, I guess input that you want to share with our audience? I guess
Johnny,
you didn't expect me to ask that.
No, that's okay. I think I've talked a lot about what should be done and taking small steps and a pragmatic way of doing things, right? So I would just like the audience to take a step back,
Yes.
right? And understand where they are, right? In the PAM journey. Do they have something going on? If not, then what should they do? Maybe take the step 1, right? Just call us, right? Or just ask us any question. Or if they are already running a PAM program, again, just call us, right?
Yeah.
It's just an assessment, right? So my only message is, yes, just know what you want and take small steps, and we are there to help you. So maybe we look forward to receiving emails or calls with any questions you have so far.
Well, with that next slide, we have our contact information, and we'll be glad to hear back from you and able to share further about privileged access management. For now, thank you very much for listening, and I hope this information, the presentation today was informative to you, and looking forward to hearing back from you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.